Hey everybody, this is Robert from Black Belt Gaming, continuing my Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition series. I'm a bit under the weather, so please excuse me if I sound congested, and hopefully I'll avoid any major coughing fits. Tonight I thought I would take a look at another basic class, the Fighter. The Fighter is one of those, kind of like we did with Thief last time, that most classes can, or most races can play. In fact, there are some level limits on it, a bit more than the Thief, but they're higher on average. Dwarves can reach level 9, elves level 7, gnomes level 6, half-elves level 8, halflings level 6, half-orcs level 10, and humans are unlimited. They can go as high as your campaign allows. The principal attribute of the Fighter is strength, so you must have a minimum of 9, and you need to have a constitution of 7 or higher. A good dexterity score does help. And if a fighter has a 15 strength or above, he gets to add 10% to experience points awarded by the Dungeon Master. That strength, it does give fighters a bonus for hitting opponents, and it increases damage. And they use a 10-sided dice, or 10-sided die for hit points. The player's handbook says that fighters do not have access to magical spells. However, they get the best choice for armor and weapons. They're not limited. You can go with a shield, without a shield, a big two-handed weapon, or a single-handed weapon, bows, crossbows, anything you want. Armor, all the way up to plate armor. Not a lot of information in the player's handbook beyond that, other than they can eventually attract a body of followers, and after 9th level they will gain 3 hit points per level. After 9th you're called a lord by that time. So good armor, good weapons, a 10-sided die for hit points. Is there anything else? Actually, yes, there is something special that fighters can do that sometimes gets overlooked, and it is in the handbook, but it's not right where you think it would be. Let me show you where it is. If you take a look at this table, this is fighters, paladins, and rangers attacks per melee round. You see that fighters 1 through 6, paladins 1 through 6, everybody gets 1 attack per round. But you do see a little star here, and we'll go down. And this is often missed by folks, even people that have played the game a long time. It says this excludes melee combat with monsters of less than 1 hit die, and non-exceptional, like level 0, humans and semi-humans. All creatures with less than one 8-sided hit die. All of these creatures entitle a fighter to attack once for each of his or her experience levels. So, another question that comes up with this is, yes, the fighter may be facing a group of 4 kobolds, and the fighter might be 3rd level. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the fighter is going to get an extra attack? It says an extra attack for each of his or her levels of experience. So a 3rd level fighter is going to get 3 attacks. Would that be just on one of the kobolds or the group? There's been some debate there. I think it's rather silly to think that all 3 attacks would go on the same kobold. This is meant to be a sweeper, a fighter just tearing through, hacking to the left, hacking to the right, thrusting straight ahead, and just mowing down groups of these basically minion level monsters. That, in my opinion, is the spirit of this rule and how it should probably be interpreted. So keep that in mind with your fighters. Your fighters are really strong against things like kobolds and other lesser powerful monsters, untrained humans. And if you look on this chart with attacks per round, you also see that the fighter and the paladin are both pretty good at advancing with number of attacks per round. You see once they get 7 to 12, it starts at 3 attacks every 2 rounds. Supposedly, if I read this correctly, in first edition Dungeons and Dragons, you get those 2 attacks in the first round, and then you get the 1 attack in the following round, and it alternates that way. And then fighters 13 and up are going to get 2 attacks each round. This really shouldn't be underestimated. I've heard talk in later editions, like 3rd edition and others, that the fighter really wasn't as strong. It was a boring class to play. But attacks per melee round, especially if you look at how combat was designed or roughly designed to work in 1st edition, this made the fighter extremely powerful. Now I'm actually showing you something here that's the work of another person. I can't quite recall who it was right at the moment, and I apologize for that. This is something I found on Dragon's Foot, a set of forums dedicated to older editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, I think it's by DM Prata, P-R-A-T-A. This is called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Initiative and Combat Table. And it's a lengthy document, but it talks about, just right by the books, how combat was written to work. And it tries to wrestle with some of the things that maybe didn't fit so well together. And we'll probably kind of talk about the spirit of 1st edition AD&D later, but I just want you to take a look at this. A single attack. Most of your foes are going to only have 1 attack. But coming up against a fighter that's, let's say, has that 3 attacks every 2 rounds. On that first round that they have their both attacks, their 2 attacks, they're going to come in here and you're rolling the initiative. And one side wins and the other side loses. But that fighter, according to this, is automatically going to get that initiative and go first because they've got 2 attacks. One is going to go before and the other one will follow after. And then if they face other enemies that have 2 attacks as well, they're going to match up. So initiative will clearly determine which one is going to get that first attack off before the other. But against someone that only has 1 attack, the fighter is automatically going to go first. And that makes a fighter quite strong, especially against opponents, like I said, who only have 1 attack. And so having more attacks per round really plays out differently than some of the modern gaming we're familiar with, where you roll the initiative and just it's your turn, it's your turn, it's your turn. And if you get a few attacks in a round, they all take place on your count. If you look at the old 1st edition combat, and I could do a whole set of videos on that, you'll just see that the fighter is meant to eventually start taking the lead here and getting the first attack off, even if they've lost the initiative. So here's just another sheet to back me up on what I'm telling you here. Done by the same gentleman. We have the high D6 roll versus a low D6 roll, and I don't know if you can make it out on camera, but it's color coded here. the high d6 roll. Let's say that it's over here and it's a melee attack. And then we go over and we're fighting someone that has a multi-attack, like 2 attacks per round. You'll see that even though they have the higher d6 roll and therefore should win initiative, actually it's the one with the higher number of attacks that goes first. And then you go with the person after that. So great way for fighters to stay ahead and hit first and hit hard. And speaking of hitting hard, let's take a look at the exceptional strength for fighters. Now, according to the core rulebook, this first AD&D Player's Handbook, the primary attribute for fighters is strength. And what they get in first edition is they get what's called exceptional strength. It's something that, let's say if they roll an 18, which is the highest score you can normally achieve with that 3d6 or 4d6, drop the lowest, keep the best 3, whatever your method of generation was, which we covered in an earlier video. Fighters can go actually above and beyond just the simple 18. So if we go down here, we'll see it here that when a fighter will roll the percentage dice and can have a wide range here. So let's say you're up against another character that has a strength of 18 and they're going to get +1 to hit and +2 to damage. But if you are a fighter and fighting is your thing, this bonus can go as high as +3 if you're right at the top with an 18 00 strength, as we used to call it, 100%. The damage is where you really see the range increase. Like I said, the 18 gets +2, but look at how it starts to increase. +3, +4, +5, all the way up to +6. Can you imagine hitting with a sword and adding an automatic 6 points of damage to each hit? That's a lot. So pretty impressive fighters with the exceptional strength here. And so this doesn't work for the other classes. It's exclusive to the fighter. So that's another thing that made fighters quite powerful. Let's continue just a little bit more with the fighter. And let's talk about the different kind of fighters that you can play. Back with first edition, and you typically had, on average, lower characteristic or attribute scores just from the way that you rolled the dice. And I don't remember having the, level up and then all of your scores will increase. So this increase in attribute score is something that I think is more connected to the newer editions of Dungeons and Dragons. In a previous video, I talked about how there were some different methods that evolved for adjudicating skill checks or attribute checks in the game. And one of the most popular was just simply rolling a d20 and getting under your ability score, or taking the 2, 3, or 4d6, or even 5d6 if it was really hard, and rolling the dice and also trying to get under your ability score to accomplish something. So ability scores could really allow you to shine in different areas. So since there wasn't a strict skill system in AD&D, at least at the start, you could have your fighter with a high charisma, and you could play him as a very fast talking. It could be a great leader, perhaps a warlord or commander of other men, or it could be someone with a fast, quick wit and able to bluff and manipulate others through conversation. You could play fighters with high intelligence who were quite well educated. If you had a low intelligence, you could play your typical barbarian type that didn't have much education. Many different things that you could try, just combining it along with the other attributes, and whether they were high scores or low scores, just to help give your particular character more personality and more make it more unique than the person that's playing the fighter next to you. Armor and weapons. One of the things that we enjoyed doing a long time ago was giving each other some real flexibility with what the armor looked like. So I remember one of the characters wanted to play more of a barbarian looking fighter. But, you know, armor, good armor, is something that fighters really can benefit from. So how could you play this barbarian type and you didn't want him walking around in plate mail like a knight? How could the barbarian wear plate? Well, if you're familiar with the video game Skyrim and some of the different outfits they had on that you could put on there, you could see more of a rough kind of Viking barbarian look to some of the designs. But you know, we were playing long time ago, back in the early 80s, so what we used to do was just say you needed to have a few pieces on of that set of armor in order for it to count. So maybe you had on some heavy bracers that look like plate, and maybe you had on a horned helmet, and then a small, even if it was just, you know, not huge, but some kind of chest plate maybe strapped on. You know, you could still see your abs and your hairy back or whatever you were in the mood for. You know, maybe you had one piece of plate kind of covering one shoulder of your sword arm, however you wanted to describe it. But that would count as plate armor, and you didn't have to really be all decked out, completely covered head to toe like a knight ready to joust. You know, that character in that outfit could stand right next to the knight, and they would both basically be wearing the same armor class worth of equipment. We kept the encumbrance the same. My particular group didn't go overboard with counting up encumbrance so much, but keep the encumbrance fair, and have fun with sort of reskinning or changing around the design of the armor that you have on. So like I said, it could be as simple as just a little plate on the chest that's strapped on, so like a breastplate of some kind. Or it could be much heavier than that. It's a mix of chain and plate and leather, whatever style that you wanted your fighter to have. And we had fun with that. It allowed us to make our fighters look and feel very different. And that's just some suggestions there, so that you don't keep your fighter boring. You know, a lot of people look back at the older editions like this and they say fighters were boring, they were all the same. Well, I'll tell you, when we played this game, no, they weren't. They were very different. And that's because we used our imaginations and we weren't told what to do simply by the rules on the paper and limited by the artwork that we would see. So use your imagination, have fun, and make the fighter that looks and feels like the kind of fighter you want to play. Well, I guess that'll wrap it up on the first edition fighter from the Player's Handbook. I know I may have raised some questions about combat and how the combat system works, since the fighters make, well, all the characters make so much use of that, but that's definitely for another video. That's kind of a crunchy video talking about how combat works with all the different rules that we have available to work with in first edition. But just keep in mind that a couple of special things there that really keep the fighter strong are the more than one attack per round, and how that works with the initiative. You know, how it even breaks the initiative if the opponent rolls better than you do. And then also kind of the sweeper, the guy that wades into the minions and just clears a path. So those extra attacks per level against those very low hit die monsters. Alright, well thanks for watching everybody. I'll catch you later.